Let's go to our political panel this morning. Labour Minister Michael Wood, National MP Erica Stanford. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Morning.
Great to have you on the show. Erica, I want to start with you. This deal is obviously fantastic, but it seems that some of our big markets have been caught short. What do you make of it?
Look, there'll be some sectors that are waking up this morning and will be overjoyed. This is a great deal for some sectors, but the issue was always going to be around dairy and beef and making that agreement meaningful for them. Now, we haven't seen the detail in the agreement yet. We've just seen some of the high-level stuff, but you've already seen the meat industry and the dairy industry now coming out saying that they're very disappointed. We needed to diversify away from, our biggest market in terms of dairy and beef, and this agreement was going to allow us to do that. And they obviously are very disappointed, but we want to see a bit more of the detail before we pass more comment.
Yeah, fair enough. Michael, do you think, as the Meat Industry Association has suggested this morning, that we should have walked away from the deal or continued trying to negotiate until we had better access for those products?
This is a huge deal for New Zealand, around about $1.8 billion of benefits to our economy, and for the meat and dairy sector, around about $600 million of benefit once it's fully implemented, 91% of tariffs eliminated from day one. So there are benefits across a range of sectors. These things are always hard negotiations, and it's well known that the EU takes a strong position in terms of protecting its meat and dairy interests. I think our negotiators have done a good job here. We never get everything that we want, but there are gains right across the economy, and this is going to benefit the New Zealand economy and build Kiwi jobs.
Yeah, you cannot argue with free trade. It's one of those issues that across the political divide, everyone knows that as a small trading nation we absolutely need. Let's move on this morning to our children and schools and the shortage of teachers, severe shortage of teachers. In fact, we're short 1,000 educators across the system. And there is a problem at the moment that when you try and recruit teachers from overseas, if you're a school, then you have to fill in all this paperwork, you have to pay money to have this done, you have to do a job check to make sure there's no Kiwi teacher available that would otherwise be able to fill the void. Have a listen to Stephen Hargraves from Maclean's College.
Schools are finding it hard to stay open. Unnecessary cost, unnecessary administrative burden on schools. We're short of teachers, we've got a staffing crisis. Surely somebody can streamline that process for us.
Minister, why don't you blow up that bureaucratic burden?
Well, we have streamlined the process. The new accredited employer work visa, which has been established from over the last few weeks, is a streamlined process. 3 simple steps. Employers, of course, do need to apply. We would expect that when employers are bringing in workers from overseas. There's a small cost recovery fee that applies to every single sector. In the case of certain teachers and secondary school teaching that Mr Hargraves will be seeking, there's also a 2-year pathway to residency, which makes it extremely attractive for foreign teachers to come in here. Thousands of employers have already registered as accredited employers. It's not an overly complex process. This process will support schools, but also other workforces, to get the staff that they need.
Have you been through the process?
Well, no, because I'm not an employer
that's the
looking
point,
to bring
isn't it?
migrants in.
You've just said it's not complex, and you've just said it's not complex. You've also said it's a small fee. What's the fee?
$600.
Is that small for a school?
And that is $600.
Erica.
$600.
Erica, your turn.
Yes. Look, it is overly cumbersome when you've got a workforce that's in crisis, schools that are closing down because they can't find teachers, and I think Michael hit the nail on the head. We've even put teachers on the green list. That's how short we are. Yet we're making schools go through a long, laborious process which costs them $600 per teacher on top of a fee to be registered to be accredited, fill out all of this paperwork. When we know that they're short, there's no reason for a job check. These teachers are all covered by union collective agreements. We don't need to make sure they're not being exploited because they're part of that agreement. It makes no sense. It's a ridiculous checkbox exercise that is going to cost our schools thousands of dollars when they should be putting that money into our kids.
Minister?
Well, we've set up a system which applies across a range of different sectors, and one of the things in these roles that you have to get used to is you can't just say the thing that pleases a particular sector group in front of you to score points. You actually have to set up a system that's fair and equitable. OK, there's a request to carve out teachers, but what about other sectors who also want carve-outs? Before you, once you start going down that track, you end up with a very fragmented system.
What if
the costs that kick in under the costs that kick in under the system are simply cost recovery costs. So if you stay to one sector, you don't have to pay those costs. You'll be saying to the other sectors that they need to take on that increased cost share, and that wouldn't be fair. As I said, this is a much simpler pathway than we previously had.
It's cost
recovery. We're going to enable teachers to get a 2-year pathway to residency
which is great.
In those areas where it's been harder to get them.
You should be absolutely all credit to you for doing that. But I just would have thought, and like you're a Labour minister, and surely if you were going to make any exemptions, you'd do like health and education. You know, like the future of our kids and the health of our country. You're the employer.
Well, that's where Erica's actually wrong, because, of course, the individual board of trustees are actually the employers of teachers at schools. We have the accredited employer work visa system in place to ensure that people are going to be treated well, that when an employer brings someone in, that we know that there are good systems in that particular employer to make sure they look after the pastoral needs of that person, that there isn't a record previously of behaving badly towards migrant workers. Now, we wouldn't, of course, expect that in the average school.
I was going to say, what school is exploiting migrant labour?
But we have those checks in place to make sure that the particular employer doesn't have a record in those areas, and that's really important. We are moving past.
How many schools have been taken to task over being exploiting migrants in the last 5 years?
Across a whole range of employers, we have had those challenges.
Okay.
And it is appropriate that we do check that before we bring migrant workers into our country.
We've got to move on, because there is a big change happening overnight, actually, today, to our health system. We now have Health New Zealand. All the DHB is gone. And Good Night Nurse, and now we have Health New Zealand, which is, an exciting big change for the health sector. Erica, what does the change mean practically today for those nurses going to work, for those doctors going to work?
Oh, different name, same problems. Same overworked nurses, critical healthcare shortages, hospitals around the country that have cancelled everything apart from emergency work. Nothing will change today. What we needed to see was, especially from the new Minister of Immigration, we needed to see nurses put on the fast track to residence so we can compete with Australia, for example, and attract more nurses here. Instead, nurses have got the raw deal, having to wait 2 years for residence. We're not going to attract more of them, which means we're just going to continue on with these critical health workforce shortages that we've got. There was a simple fix, and I'm hoping that the new Minister of Immigration, who's standing beside me, is going to put nurses on that fast track list. That's the first thing that they should have done under this new restructure, but they haven't.
Minister, I'll let you respond to that.
Sure. Look, the start of the health reforms today and the creation of Health New Zealand is about tackling the long-term challenges in health. We know we've got those shorter-term challenges as we deal with COVID, as we deal with seasonal flu and some of those workforce pressures. This is about the fact that we currently have 21 different district health boards with their own governance, their own bureaucracy, a postcode lottery where people in different parts of the country get different standards of care. And I don't think that anyone would say that that is fair or reasonable for Kiwis. This is about making sure that all New Zealanders have access to good health care, that we do so in an efficient way, and that we can deal with some of those workforce challenges at a national level instead of having 21 different district health boards having their own approaches to training and recruiting nurses and dealing with the immigration system. This will lead to a better healthcare system for all New Zealanders.
And what a worse time to be doing it. In the midst of a global pandemic, when we've got one of the worst flu seasons we've had, and that was predictable because our borders have been closed, there was not a worse time to do this. We needed to be focused on outcomes for Kiwis.
Minister,
well, that is typical National Party thinking. Forget about the long term, just focus on immediately what's there. That's how we've got into these challenges, because they put these challenges off for too long. They underfunded the health system. We've got record funding going in now, and we're making sure that we end that postcode lottery. I think the question has got to be, when you turn up to a hospital, how long is it going to be before you're seen in an emergency department? And the changes today are going to make no difference, and no difference for probably 5 years. And under this, we will move towards that being the same standard and the same resourcing in Auckland as it is in Southland.
Okay. No. I love the passion, understand the passion. But very quickly, last question to you, Michael. Do you think the system is ready for it? Like, we're not going to see another teachers' pay cock up, like, nurses' pay cock up, or another issue with bedding in this new system?
Yes, I do think that the sector is. Of course, with a big system change like this, there'll be a lot of work that we have to go through. It won't always be entirely smooth. But when we talk to, for example, the representatives of the workforces involved, they say that it's time to make this change because they think that we need a more efficient system and a more nationally consistent system.
All right, Minister, thank you very much for your time. Thank you both for coming and bringing the boxing gloves. I always love that. Labour Minister Michael Wood and National MP Erica Stanford with us this morning.